India has gone through so many phases, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm sure our first speaker has studied India at most of those phases through its formative years. To take us on the journey of the various reforms that shaped our nation, we have with us Mr. Gautam Chikkarmani, the VP of the Observer Research Foundation ORF, which is an independent global think tank, an author whose areas of research are economics, politics, foreign policy, and the Mahabharata. Earlier, he has held leadership positions in some of India's top newspapers and magazines. Over to you, sir.
Hi. Can you hear me? Is my voice clear to the last person there? So what has happened is that this book, from the constraints of P.V. Narasimha Rao to the convictions of Narendra Modi, is talking about reforms. Today, Narasimha Rao ji has been awarded the Bharat Ratna. And I can't tell you, I think this is the most deserved Bharat Ratna in the economic policy space. Had it not been for Narasimha Rao ji, you guys wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here. We would have been back in 1990 with a balance of payments crisis, poverty, no opportunities, and so on and so forth. Narasimha Rao ji turned the tide. The entire economic policy for the previous 44 years was going this way. In one policy, Narasimha Rao ji turned it around and he stood there strongly, unmoving, unshakable, with full force, without coming into the public. The public face of that policy was Finance Minister Manmohan Singh. But the strength behind him was P.V. Narasimha Rao. I'm so glad Narendra Modi ji has given this award to him, and dil se main unko dhanyawad deta hu. So I'm going to be talking about economic reforms. I began to write this book to celebrate the 30 years of reforms in 2021, which is 3 decades from 1991 to 2021, and just see what had happened, how we had grown, what are the various economic policies that came in the past 3 decades across different prime ministers and governments. So I began to study that. But as I began to read that policy again, I'm a child of liberalization. So my first job was in 1992. And liberalization was just about beginning. It was pulling up all the boats up. The tide of liberalization, the tide of economic growth was coming into India, and I was there to witness it. I was there to experience it. And so I saw that. And when I started researching all over again what was happening, I realized that it's not enough. So I had to go back into 1947 when we got our independence to the policies there. Once I got there, I realized I need to go a little behind for the pre-independence, and you will see all these policies. This entire evolution of policies that came from 1944 till 1990, there were 8 industrial policies that preceded the Statement on Industrial Policy in 1991, which was tabled in Parliament in July 1991. This is that story. The first, oh my God, this is huge, yeah? I didn't expect it to be so huge. So the policies for the first 44 years of independence, there was the Bombay Plan. It was set up by industrialists. I'm going to go very fast through this because in half an hour I need to cover a lot. It was designed by industrialists. It was followed by the Statement of Industrial Policy. Both of these policies were pre-independence. Then came the resolution of Jawaharlal Nehru. This policy brought the worst aspects of this 1945 policy into itself by saying state will do everything. State will start control. This was the beginning of state control. This policy was alive for 8 years. And during this 8 years, the state began to gather all the economic decision making into itself. It was becoming like a socialist pattern of society, but I think it was just a wrong move. Meanwhile, the narratives that were beginning were at that time Shri 420, business is evil, Do Bhiga Zameen, money is evil, the being rich is bad. These were the narratives that were being shaped up in our minds at that time in the 1950s. The next policy was the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956, which consolidated it and hardened what began in 1948. And here the narratives had changed to this money lender is bad. Every time you go, that money is evil, the moneyed people are evil, the entrepreneurs are bad, was the narrative. Naya Daur, excellent movie. All of you may have seen it. But the fight between modernity and development and the inclusiveness of it was out there. But at the end of the day, Jeevan was a bad guy and money remained evil. Indira Gandhi came in with the 1973 policy. She hardened it even further. This was the time where the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Act was passed, MRTC, and this resulted in roti, kapada aur makan, and this is what we were scavenging for, our parents' generation, and Namak Haram, where industrialists are evil. All these are great movies. I've chosen these movies because they were among the best blockbusters. These were the blockbuster movies of the time. Morarji Desai came, people thought that emergency khatam ho gayi hai, so maybe now we will have a new narrative. But as far as the economic policies went, he continued with the same. So you had Kala Patthar. Kala Patthar is the culmination of Indira Gandhi's policy, which got released in 79, but it basically justified the nationalization of coal mines. So this was the time, in this entire 44 years, whenever there was a problem, the best policy was nationalize. I'll come to this later on. And this Trishul, again, businessmen was bad. All through, we've been bombarded with these narratives. So economic policy, going into narratives, coming into us, and because we had nothing other than poverty to celebrate, we said, हाँ ठीक है, money is bad, money is evil. Indira Gandhi came back in 1980. This policy came for 10 years. At this time, the things began to change. The politics and business, the tension and the sleeping together of business and politics began. We've all seen Jaane Bhi Do Yaaro, excellent movie. We've all seen Ardh Satya, excellent movie. These were the movies that defined those times. Vishwanath Pratap Singh came just for 1 year. It was an insipid policy, a rewriting of more of the same, without any new thing, maybe mild changes. In fact, Indira Gandhi also tried to do some of the changes. Rajiv Gandhi, her son, when he became the Prime Minister, he also brought in certain changes, but I call them just policy repairs, not policy reforms. This was the time when, crime became the sole career option. It launched the career of, who's the director? That's right. So, I told you about nationalization. This is what our industrialists, today all of you money managers, CEOs, people who examine businesses closely are taking some things for granted. Now imagine that the IT sector of which you are the CEO or of where you manage the money gets nationalized overnight. This was the period, these 44 years. In 1953, 9 companies were nationalized of airlines. They became Air India and Indian Airlines. In 1956, 154 Indian, 16 foreign, 75 provident societies were nationalized. And so on and so forth. There were 2 rounds of banks, one in 1969, one will come later in 1980. 14 banks that had 85% of deposits, that added up to 50 crore, by the way, at that time. Coal mines has been a 4-year thing, so 71, 72, 72, 73, and 74. In 4 years, 937 mines were nationalized, all because, so when you have a problem, answer is nationalize. Textile mills. The aim was to save the mills ostensibly. The outcome is the creation of Lower Parel. And this became the Coal India Limited. Maruti was set up in 1971 by Sanjay Gandhi. I don't know how many of you knew, this was nationalized through an act of parliament. This is the first and the only time that a son of a serving prime minister's company, because he had a great dream, was nationalized. Of course, this is not to take away anything from Maruti, which is the entire auto sector that has come, mushroomed, began, and the whole auto ancillary businesses that have come. It began with Maruti and now are everywhere. I believe Hyundai is now going to come out with an IPO. So, And this is round 2, which is finally 6 banks. All the big banks that you see, for instance, all these are the brands: Maruti, Air India, Mumbai Textile Mills, Punjab National Bank, Coal India, GIC were all nationalized. Whenever there's a problem, you nationalize. GIC was nationalized in a manner which said that, among other things, it was made into 4 companies, which is non-life insurance, North, South, West, and East. So it was as random as that. So what did all these great policies, when I told you that they are moving in this direction, deliver? This depreciation of the rupee, sale of gold, another gold deal. Now, selling gold was the outcome. What was the problem? Selling gold is not an issue. When we all take on debt and we take a home loan or something, you need to sell everything in order to pay your EMI. So this was a good thing. But it showed the desperation where we stood. And then at 12:50 p.m. on 24th July, this was how the policy was laid. Just this one sentence: I beg to lay on the table a statement on industrial policy, full stop, nothing more, by a junior minister, Kurian. Not even the finance minister, not the prime minister. Can you imagine a policy today of this dimension being launched with such little fanfare? He just tabled the policy and ran for his life. The political environment wasn't ready for it. So the policy is there. हमने ये कर दिया जो करना था, but मेरे को ज़्यादा जवाब मत पूछिए, सवाल मत पूछिए मेरे से. It had 5 main components. The first was industrial licensing. Actually, when you say license Raj, it is incorrect. I think it should be called the quota Raj. What the policy did was it removed the quotas. So suppose you had 10 steel plants and you would distribute it among these 10 people. From this policy onward, if there are 30 out there who want to set up a steel plant, they were allowed to, but license continued and continues till today. So I think license Raj is a wrong intonation, but that's what we have inherited. Foreign investment was opened up. I'll come to this later. This was a source of pain for many Indian industrialists. The first they celebrated, the second they didn't want. Foreign technology agreements, which is basically earlier you could take this much versus that, this much percentage as royalty versus that much percentage. It was eased a bit. Public sector, in the sense, there was a re-evaluation of public sector. Grand statements were made about disinvestment. Some of it did take place, but broadly, it was to show that we are doing something, and the privatization of, as a word was it was a 4-letter word, so they used a word called disinvestment. The first round of disinvestment, by the way, happened in packets. So what the government did was, it would take 2 loss-making companies, 2 profit-making companies, pack them into a single unit, which the public sector mutual funds and LIC, etc., could buy, and then get listed. So it wasn't really as free for all. So you were loaded with each subsidizing the other. MRTP Act, this was the words. This was now amended, and the whole business was eased. Among other things, in MRTP, the Birlas were pulled up, saying that they go and grab licenses, they go and take capacities, but they don't do it. So every time, every age, I don't want to go back to those slides, but in the 50s, the Tatas were bad, so airlines were nationalized. In the 80s and 90s, Birlas were bad, 70s and 80s. And every time now we are seeing 2 other big names who are being hated by the political community. All the while, anybody who is successful was pulled down. Wealth is bad, wealth creators are evil, and the state must run everything. After that 1991 policy, immediately within 2 years, we were left with 2 months of imports. That's it. By the way, 2 months is also, this is because of World Bank data. Actually, there was a time when we had 2 weeks of imports only. From there, within 2-3 years, we were at 7 months, and today we are at 10. We were at 18 months some time back. Poverty has reduced completely. It had gone down till 6% in 2019. It's at 1% according to IMF. It's at 5% according to ADB, who use different methodologies to calculate poverty. This is $1.9 per annum per day spending. The GDP, which was 270 billion in 1991 was 3.1 trillion in 2021. It's close to 4 trillion today. So in the past 30 years, from Do Bhiga Zameen and Mother India, the narratives have changed, and what I see are these. In 1995, there was celebration. In 2009, there was wealth. As a matter of fact, for the first time, we saw in Dil Chahta Hai that wealth is a natural, it's a very easy thing. It's not, there is nobody going around, butchering the poor labor, exploiting the woman, etc. No such thing. It was, matter of fact, a cool movie. 2019, Gully Boy, the aspiration to become wealthy. मेरे को 10 लाख रुपया चाहिए, वो गाना गा के मैं 10 लाख रुपया कमाऊंगा. Great movie. And of course, now we are moving back to our roots. So what are the 4 big lessons that I learned from 30 years of reforms? First, every reform, there is a law and an economics handle. So in economy, you can say, let's do this, let's do that, but it needs to be supported by a law. Often not. For instance, the Jan Dhan Yojana is not a law. The statement on industrial policy, which began this entire, which opened the gates of reforms in 1991 by Narasimha Rao ji, and for which he has got a Bharat Ratna today, was not a law. But everything else, for instance, let's say Aadhaar is a law, Competition Commission is a law, the setting up of regulators was done through law. The GST is the most complex law, most complex economic law. It had 4 constitutional amendments, 29 state laws, 7 union territories notified with a single notification. That time, Kashmir was still a state. Many of the reforms are all work in progress. For instance, GST began 37 years ago when VP Singh in Rajiv Gandhi's time put out the motion that perhaps we need to have a value-added tax. This moved on until 2005. Manmohan Singh brought a value-added tax. In between, there was a Senvat, and today we have a GST. Or if you look at Manrega, which is the most high-profile and the most successful social security scheme, it began in 1952 with the Community Development Program, 1977 Food for Work, 1980 National Rural Program, 1989 Jawahar Rozgar Yojana, which has now culminated in MG Narega. So they are evolutionary, and to track one policy at one particular time would be an inaccurate assessment of that policy. Third is, we don't give adequate respect or we don't celebrate the reformers. In my opinion, there are the 2 big reformers were P.V. Narasimha Rao, who opened the gates of reforms, and Narendra Modi, who has since then done several incremental reforms across prime ministers. And finally, we have seen the backlash. I told you about that foreign investment. That's the Bombay Club. In 1993, it was led by Rahul Bajaj, who said that we don't want this kind of liberalization, it is not good. You open it for us, but not for them. You need to give us a platform, even platform. You cannot allow them, after having bound us for 44 years, you cannot just open us up for global competition. I think he had a point, but he didn't have the politics. 30 years later, Rahul Bajaj may have lost, but Bajaj Auto has won. His company has definitely won. Same in 2021, we saw with the farm laws, 3 beautiful laws, which were all there, much needed. 20 years of deliberations have happened. You can read all that about it in my book. After that, you saw the violence in Delhi and how the farm laws were repealed. I celebrated it when the farm laws were enacted, and I condemned it when they were repealed. These are the major reforms. You will recognize some of them. I don't want to go one by one. But these are, in my opinion, the 15 major reforms that happened in the last 30 years. The labor laws, the labor codes, healthcare, national privatization of Air India. This was a big one. The listing of LIC, Jan Dhan Yojana. These were the 3 regulators: SEBI in 91, IRDAI in 2000, PFRDA in 2004. The reforms ahead, these are all micro reforms, but broadly there are 4 categories of reforms that I think are needed. one of which will not happen or will happen sideways. Another one will happen sideways. Third one will not happen, and the fourth one is happening. The first that will not happen is farm laws. Everybody is talking about if Modi comes in the for his third term, he will bring farm laws. In my opinion, no, I don't think so. I think they have been burnt by the 2021 three farm laws. It is very difficult politically to get it, but you never know. I'm not very optimistic or hopeful. Second, the factor markets. I'm talking about factor markets right now. So farm laws will not come. Land laws will not come. Again, land is an emotive subject, and it's very easy to build a negative public opinion for something which is for your own benefit, as it was in the case of the farm law. So these two you leave aside. Labor reforms may come because labor is a concurrent subject. And also the 4 codes have already been enacted. They just have to be notified, and then subsequently the states have to implement them. But the labor codes are such that there were 39 labor laws which have been compressed into 4 labor codes. But other than that, nothing has happened. So I think the next level where you get into the intricacies, for instance, if you take the Minimum Wages Act, do you know how many minimum wages are there in our country today? Any idea? How many minimum wages? 2,600. That was the last count, and it may have crossed 3,000 by today. Every occupation in every state has a different minimum wage, or at least by law you are required to keep it. So these frictions have to go. I don't know how the government will be able to negotiate the trade unions, but let's see how that goes. The one reform that is happening is compliance reforms. This is another book I wrote along with Rishi Agrawal, where we said that out of the 69, all businesses, they stand on 69,266 compliances. 69,266, 266, yeah. Of which 26,134 carry imprisonment clauses. 26,134. You can be jailed for not, if you have a factory. How many of you have managed factories? Yeah. So in certain factories, if you don't keep a spittoon within a certain distance from the plant and machinery, you will be jailed. If you don't reconstitute the canteen committee once every 2 years, you will be jailed. And so on. I don't want to get into the list. Maybe that's a separate talk in itself. These reforms have happened. The first part has happened through the Jan Vishwas bill, which was based on this report, but then extended further. Out of 69,134, 113 have been decriminalized. The rest remain. Jan Vishwas Part 2 is underway right now, and Part 3 will come. So this is one major reform that will happen. It's not that people are getting jailed for these things. As several bureaucrats told us, humne jail kisko kiya hai? That's not the issue. The issue is rent seeking, the institutionalization of rent seeking. De do, nahi to jail jaoge. Dekho, aapka ye nahi hai, jail jaoge. So that the whole bribery, the whole corruption has been institutionalized in a manner where it is now you just like breathing. Ha, theek hai, the business hai, theek hai. My project costs 100 crore. Here is 120 ghoos ghas ke liye. That will change. From 1961 to 1991, we were at $39 billion in 1961. Our GDP. We grew by 6.6%. Between 1991 to 2021, we grew by 8.6%. We are now to 3.2 trillion. If all of you here and the people outside, and for the next 30 years, if we continue to grow by 8.6, which means you do nothing, just continue business as usual. All the hard work. So our parents' generation did this, my generation, our generation did this. The next generation, if it just follows what we have done, we will reach 37 trillion in the next 30 years by 2051. But if the next generation, and I have full faith in the next generation because I see far more dynamism. There is this hunger to do things. There's a Rajasic upsurge in every young person, and even not so young person, even like me. So I think from tamas we are moving to rajas. If we increase this growth rate of 8.6 by just 1 percentage point to 9.6, do you know how much higher we will be? We will be 33% higher. We'll be at 49.6 trillion. 1 percentage point. The alpha, all the finance people would know this, the alpha of just 1 percentage point gives you this, gives us this. This is where our country is headed. I think we can get there. So between 1991 to 1996, the reforms happened under deep constraints. India would have devolved. It would have not been able to pay its debts back. Between 96 to 2014, for instance, if you look at Mr. Vajpayee or even Manmohan Singh's tenure, there was a caution that we will do this, but we are not sure. Because in 1996, after all the success, you would have assumed that Congress should return to power. It didn't. After Vajpayee's reforms, you would have expected BJP would return to power. It didn't. So there was a caution. From 2014 to 24 so far, I have seen a greater conviction for reforms. Perhaps there is a political stability which enables the BJP, which enables Narendra Modi to deliver on reforms faster, with more conviction. I can see that conviction. It's not, these are not hollow words. There is no if but. There is no you can do this but that. No such thing. It's clear. Defense ke andar 100% FDI. It's clear. Rich promoters, poor companies, that era is gone under the insolvency code, bankruptcy and insolvency code. The 17 kinds of taxes that were there in indirect taxes are now gone into one tax. You can argue about number of rates and how should it be, maybe implementation, etc. But there is only one authority, GST, khatam. So there is a far greater conviction. There is an executional focus on it. But the next reforms accord, I think, after 24, will move away from constraints and cautions, and convictions will have to marry something called consensus. And we can see that happening. The political consensus around economic reforms gradually is being understood to be a far important thing. For instance, in the states, the retrograde movement back from contributory pensions back to defined benefit pensions, for instance, in Himachal Pradesh, has to go. This will end. But you need to have that consensus. So I think a lot of economic reforms will be sitting on political consensus. That's my book. I hope we have time for talk. I'm happy to take questions.
Congratulations, Swadam.
Thank you.
Excellent presentation. I'm Rajkumar Khandri. I'm the partner of the previous service. And now that is not...
दिल पे चोट तो नहीं लगी सर
The sharing part is that in 88 when I joined Academy, the mindset was the same. The quota license, as you said. But when I came to the field and I became the Commissioner Industries, I realized that there is a very clear path for the bureaucrat, regulation or facilitation. So in certain roles you have to be a facilitator. But the kind of struggle I had to go through in changing the mindset of 700 employees, those were all products of engineering colleges, was a big task. But thankfully Karnataka is one of the very progressive states and fully supported in global investment. Now I come to the question and your remarks that I want to look at the BIFR kind of cases where the recovery of credit was zero. Now we have come to IBC and we trust the wisdom of COC. Please see the level of haircuts. So my question is self-regulation going forward. How do you kind of refine it? I don't want it to be, personal, it is a personal opinion, I don't want the regulation should become a kind of rigidity. Like for example, independent directors now are under regulation, they will go to jail if they don't do a particular job. So I want to know the future of regulation, and particularly the cases like BYJU'S has happened, and the startups are looking for more opportunities.
Very good question. Can you
Sorry, I'm
put the mic to that person there who wanted to ask that? Yeah. I think, sir, regulations, laws, etc., are made for the scum of society. In every industry or every business, there are people who want to do wrong, who want to break the line, who walk on the edge of regulation. A recent financial company did that. Now, because there is a particular law or there is a particular regulation or even a small compliance or even a filing related to a particular act, it cannot be that I will apply it to you but not to him. It cannot be. That is not how governments function. That flexibility does not, governments are not allowed the flexibility that the private sector is used to get an outcome. So in that getting that balance right is not an easy job. And we have seen, for instance, I talked about 3 regulators in the financial space, but there are more. Look at the regulatory work of SEBI and compare it with the industry association kind of work done by IRDA. And you can clearly see that even regulators themselves need to be regulated better. So I think, I don't have an answer, sir. It's a critical question, and perhaps it needs deeper thought, greater research. Perhaps people like you should do it because you are the people who have experience in it. Yes, sir.
My question is on the split between services and manufacturing. There are diverse thoughts that services will drive the economy, and somebody says manufacturing will drive the economy. We haven't seen the IIP grow that great over the last few years. Capacity addition in industry is always a challenge, and land acquisition is a pain. I say that because I'm also from the manufacturing sector and we've experienced it. What is your view on this services versus manufacturing driving the growth of the economy in the future?
You know, for the past 30 years, we've been hearing, not 30 years, 20 years, I've been hearing that India has missed the manufacturing bus. Nothing can happen to it. It's over. Let's move to services. My answer is, in terms of numbers, the next 15 years has more demand, double the demand of manufactured goods than the last 15 years. So if we have missed the bus or whatever, we haven't even got onto the bus. It's time to make our own bus, make in India bus, and get onto it and do the manufacturing. Having said that, I think there is an equal or more opportunity in services as well. Here is where if I were to have a capital and if I am a young person, I wish I was 25 years old today. I'm not. But if there's a 25-year-old who has business money, and it may not even be his own, all he needs is an idea today. All of you know how money is very easy to come by. I'm not saying easy money, but it's no longer as difficult. You don't need your own personal capital as a necessary condition. I will put my money where there is maximum return on that money, which today, if I have some knowledge inside me, would be in the tech sector. But if I were to set up a manufacturing plant, so one is that part, or if I have an existing I have a friend who has sold his manufacturing plant and said he's very happy having sold it. ये नहीं चाहिए तमाशा मेरे को. कभी regulation, कभी labor, कभी inspector, कभी कोई, etc. I don't want this. So he is gone, he is happy. But for every person who is leaving, there are 10 people who are coming. And I think they need opportunities. The opportunities, for those opportunities, you need land, you need labor, you need factor market reforms, which I told you are going to be difficult. So manufacturing by large corporations will happen, will continue, may increase. More so because China is now receding, and that balance is now shifting. We have seen it in iPhones. We will see it in other sectors, in chips, in semiconductors, hopefully. The companies, the corporate refugees from China first jumped to Vietnam, and now are, because of the scale that India offers, because of the taxes tax regime which has been eased here, and because of just the hunger that's there, just the market, is a growing economy. You don't look at 49 trillion, you look at 37 trillion. Either way, I mean, you do nothing, you're going to be there. You know, within the next year or 18 months, India will be the world's 3rd largest economy. within this decade, we will be a 7 or 8 trillion economy. By 2032, a 10 trillion. 10 trillion, it gives you scale. That scale is not available in other economies. So I think at some point, mixing the Jan Vishwas, the compliances reforms, putting the energies of the entrepreneurs, I think manufacturing will start, although it is not dependent upon the government, it is dependent on that young person who wants to take the risk and has a passion that I will make this teddy bear or I will build this semiconductor factory.
I think there is a lot of focus on GDP as the metric of progress, but I think along with that, unemployment continues to be a big challenge for us, unless you classify like what Amit Shah says, that somebody selling pakodas also is employed. What are your thoughts on how can we have GDP growth, of course, but also more employment, and particularly more employment which is meaningful, organized, and so on?
Yeah. I haven't studied this subject. I need to. But let me look at it in one more metric. You're talking about inequalities, right? That there is uneven growth. There's something called the Gini coefficient, which India stands at 34. Among the top 5 economies, India matches with them. It's less than America, it's less than UK, and it's more than Germany, it's more than Japan. Less is better. So we are in the middle. I don't see anything to be overtly concerned. Yeah, there should be one. We should all have a perfect market. Everybody should earn the same amount of money, have the same house, etc. But yeah, but that's an ideal thing. Under normal circumstances, when you compare across the globe, India is doing very well for itself. It's not an unequal society. The other metric is how many people, what's that? 10% of the people own X percent of the assets. Again, India is doing very favorably on that count. So now you want to compare, let us say, Sweden with Sweden. Yeah, Sweden can be an aspiration, where Denmark can be an aspiration. We need to get there. We are not getting there, but we are not so bad that we are down in the dumps. As far as jobs, my humble apologies. It's a very technical subject. There is a lot of misinformation. There is a lot of narratives around the jobs, unemployment, etc. And I'm reading them from a distance because it's a rabbit hole. Once I will have to go very deep. And maybe in the next talk, I'll be able to answer your question. I'm not being evasive, I'm being very honest. I don't know this.
Thank you, sir.